Get out of my sight, you lazy fool! Do you even know how to drive, or are you completely useless? The rich white lady screamed, her face flushed with fury. Her voice cut through the calm afternoon air like a whip, echoing across the polished marble driveway. The black driver sat stiffly in the driver's seat of the sleek black luxury car, hands gripping the wheel, knuckles white. Sweat glistened on his forehead, though not from exertion. His composure was being tested by the public humiliation. "I've had enough of your incompetence." She spat the words, each syllable dripping with venom. Her designer heels clicked angrily on the pavement as she leaned close to the open window, eyes blazing with indignation. The rich lady, Veronica Sterling, was the kind of person who could command an entire room without raising her voice. But today, her temper had erupted in full force. Inside the limo, the air was thick with tension. Veronica's friends, adorned in sparkling jewelry and high fashion, stared in frozen disbelief. Some gasped, covering their mouths to hide their shock. Others tried to avert their eyes, embarrassed by the spectacle. Yet no one dared speak. After all, this was the Sterling family, and they never tolerated dissent, especially not from someone of lower social standing. Marcus, the driver, remained perfectly still. The corners of his mouth twitched slightly, hinting at irritation, but his eyes, hidden behind dark sunglasses, betrayed nothing. Years of experience had taught him how to endure the brunt of rich people's arrogance. Today, however, the verbal assault was particularly sharp. "You call yourself a driver?" Veronica's voice cracked with fury. "Do you even have any idea what time is? Or do you just like wasting my life pretending to work?" Her hand shot out, pointing accusingly at him, as if she could physically thrust her words into his chest. A small crowd had begun to gather at the hotel entrance, drawn by her shouts. Security personnel hovered nervously, unsure whether to intervene. Marcus's calmness, however, created a peculiar kind of tension. The contrast between his silence and her rage made her words feel heavier, almost futile. Marcus finally moved, but only slightly. He reached up, adjusting his sunglasses. The movement was deliberate, slow, almost theatrical. Every eye was drawn to him, curiosity mingling with confusion. What could he possibly be hiding behind those dark lenses? Veronica took a step back, breathing heavily, trying to regain control of the situation. She was used to having power, used to bending people to her will with a single word or glance. But Marcus's silence was unnerving. It was a quiet, steadfast defiance that no amount of shouting could shake. "You think standing there like some statue makes you better than me?" she demanded, her voice rising to a shrill scream. "You think you can just ignore me while I—" She was interrupted by a whisper of admiration from a hotel staff member. "Ma'am, please." "He's only doing his job." Veronica turned on them sharply. "Shut up! I don't need your excuses! This is my business, my time, and that's all that matters." Marcus didn't respond. His hands remained steady on the steering wheel, and his posture was impeccable. There was a subtle aura of control about him, a presence that suggested that perhaps this was not the first time someone had tried to belittle him. He had seen it all before, the sneers, the shouts, the condescending glances. But today he had a plan, a subtle twist that no one could have predicted. The tension seemed to stretch infinitely. Veronica, exhausted from her own tirade, finally took a deep breath. Her chest heaved, her face still red with anger. But she believed she had won this battle. She turned sharply, stepping away from the car, muttering about incompetence and useless people under her breath. Marcus's eyes remained hidden behind the sunglasses. But there was a flicker, a tiny smirk, almost imperceptible. He started the engine, the car humming softly, and began to drive away. The hum of the luxury car echoed in the quiet street as onlookers whispered among themselves. "Who is he really?" some asked. "He doesn't look like an ordinary driver." And just as Veronica's voice receded behind the tinted glass, Marcus slowly lifted one side of his sunglasses, revealing eyes that held a quiet, commanding intelligence. A subtle hint of wealth, experience, and a life far beyond the limits of a mere driver. Before the story continues, I have to ask, where are you watching from? Comment your country below. And if you love shocking twists and stories full of drama, don't forget to subscribe to the channel for more jaw-dropping tales. The limo pulled out smoothly, leaving Veronica fuming behind, unaware that her world was about to turn upside down. Marcus's calm demeanor, his silent confidence, and the secret he carried would soon shock everyone in ways no one could imagine. As the sleek black limo glided through the streets, Marcus's hands rested lightly on the steering wheel, yet every movement was precise, almost ritualistic. The hum of the engine seemed to echo his inner calm, a stark contrast to the chaos he had just endured. Outside, the city moved in its usual hurried rhythm, but inside the car, a different world existed, a world of silent observation, quiet control, and hidden power. Veronica Sterling sat in the back, still fuming, her fingers tapping violently against her designer handbag. The limousine's tinted windows shielded the world outside from her angry glare, but they could not shield her from the subtle judgments she was now receiving from herself. She kept glancing at Marcus, the man she had so cruelly berated, but he remained composed, almost impervious to her rage. There was something about him, something she couldn't place, the way he held himself, so steady, so dignified. The subtle tension in his shoulders suggested strength, not weakness. His hands, though appearing ordinary on the wheel, moved with a precision and grace that spoke of discipline, experience, and control. Veronica tried to dismiss it. She told herself that he was just a driver, nothing more. Yet, in the pit of her stomach, a flicker of doubt began to grow. Marcus glanced at the rearview mirror not to check traffic, but to observe her reactions. His eyes, dark and discerning, caught every twitch of her expression, every subtle gesture of frustration. He had learned long ago that people revealed more about themselves when they thought no one was watching. And today, Veronica Sterling had revealed everything. Her arrogance, her impatience, her sense of entitlement. The drive was smooth, almost eerily quiet except for Veronica's occasional muttered complaints. She did not realize that Marcus had been in similar situations countless times before, dealing with people who wielded wealth as a weapon, mistaking it for power. But Marcus had learned patience, strategy, and most importantly, discretion. He knew when to speak, when to act, and when to remain silent, because sometimes silence was louder than words. The interior of the limousine reflected more than wealth. It reflected the dichotomy of appearances versus reality. Velvet seats, polished wood accents, and soft ambient lighting created an atmosphere of luxury, but it could not conceal the tension between passenger and driver. Marcus allowed his mind to wander briefly, recalling fragments of his own life, the life that had been carefully hidden from the world. He had once walked in the same halls of power that Veronica now thought she ruled. He had sat at tables where decisions were made that affected millions, not because of inherited wealth, but because of skill, intelligence, and vision. Years ago, he had chosen to live incognito for reasons only he fully understood, stepping away from public scrutiny and adopting a life that would appear ordinary to those around him. Few could guess that the man behind the wheel, quiet and unassuming, had once commanded boardrooms, orchestrated deals, and navigated crises that would terrify most people. As Veronica continued her muttering, Marcus's eyes briefly flicked to his cuff, a luxury watch peeking subtly from beneath his tailored sleeve. The watch was not just an accessory. It was a remnant of his true life, a silent hint to those perceptive enough to notice. He did not flaunt it. He did not need to. It was a symbol of the control he wielded over circumstances, the reminder that appearances were deceiving. Veronica's attention, however, remained stubbornly focused on the man she had humiliated. "Why is he so calm?" she whispered under her breath. The question betrayed both her confusion and her inability to comprehend that control and composure were not always the result of fear or submission. They could also be born of experience, intelligence, and quiet authority. Marcus finally broke the silence, his voice low, polite, and deliberate. "Traffic is clear ahead, ma'am. We'll arrive on time," he said. The words were ordinary, but the tone carried an unspoken command. There was no hint of anger, no trace of humiliation from earlier, only efficiency and calm. The drive continued, but subtle cues suggested that the story was far from over. Marcus's movements remained smooth, almost mechanical, yet every gesture carried weight. The way he adjusted the rearview mirror, the slight tilt of his head, the controlled tapping of his fingers, each action was deliberate. A silent choreography of discipline. A small part of Veronica began to feel the shift, though she could not articulate it. The arrogance she had wielded like a sword now felt fragile, almost childish in the presence of a man who commanded respect without a single raised voice. She tried to reassert control, but the flicker of doubt in her mind was growing stronger, like a shadow creeping along the edges of her confidence. Marcus, meanwhile, allowed himself a small, almost imperceptible smirk as he glanced ahead. He was ready. The moment to reveal a glimpse of his true self was approaching, the moment that would change Veronica's perception forever. All it required was a single gesture, a subtle hint, a quiet removal of the barrier that had kept his identity hidden. And then, just as the limousine turned a corner into the bustling avenue, the sun glinted off his sunglasses, reflecting the world around him. Behind those dark lenses lay a story waiting to be told, a story that no one in that car, not even Veronica, would soon forget. The limousine glided smoothly over the city streets, its polished black exterior reflecting the late afternoon sun. Inside, the atmosphere was a mix of tension and anticipation. Veronica Sterling leaned back, her arms crossed tightly, still simmering with indignation. She could not shake the humiliation of the public confrontation, and the memory of Marcus's calm composure gnawed at her pride. Marcus's hands rested lightly on the wheel, his posture impeccable, his eyes calm behind dark sunglasses. To any observer, he appeared to be nothing more than a competent chauffeur, silently ferrying a rich passenger to her destination. But every subtle movement, every measured gesture hinted at something far greater. The audience of one, Veronica, was oblivious to the true weight behind the man she had belittled. As the limousine merged into the bustling avenue, Veronica's irritation bubbled up again. "Do you even know where you're going?" she snapped, her voice sharp. "I need to be on time, and I won't tolerate any more mistakes." Marcus, unshaken, replied evenly, "Traffic is light on this route, ma'am. We'll arrive ahead of schedule." His words were polite, almost deferential, but the calm certainty in his voice carried authority. Veronica frowned. There was something unnerving about a man who refused to be rattled, someone who remained composed when she had unleashed a storm of verbal abuse. She turned slightly, scrutinizing him, trying to find a crack in the armor of his composure. "You're too calm," she said under her breath, almost to herself. "No one is this calm after being yelled at like that. You're hiding something." Marcus's mind, however, was elsewhere. He observed her in detail, the tense grip of her fingers on her designer handbag, the subtle tightening of her jaw, the way her eyes darted impatiently toward the clock. Each movement told a story, her arrogance, her impatience, her obsession with control. He noted the patterns, the habits, the flaws, and he cataloged them silently, storing them away for the moment when the truth would reveal itself. The city passed by in a blur of glass buildings and bustling sidewalks. But inside the limousine, time seemed to slow. Marcus's mind wandered to fragments of his life, carefully hidden from the world. Once he had commanded boardrooms, negotiated deals that shaped entire industries, and influenced decisions that affected millions. But all of that had been set aside for anonymity, for the rare luxury of moving unseen, blending into a world that underestimated him at every turn. As the limousine approached a high-profile gala, the tension in the car thickened. Veronica adjusted her designer scarf, attempting to reassert control over a situation she could not fully dominate. She glanced at Marcus again, suspicion flickering across her face. "You're hiding something," she whispered, more to herself than anyone else. "I don't know what it is, but there's more to you than you let on." Marcus, sensing the moment, allowed a subtle smirk to form at the corner of his mouth. It was barely perceptible, a flicker that suggested he was fully aware of the growing realization in Veronica's mind. He remained silent, letting the tension mount, letting her imagination fill the gaps. Through the tinted windows, the crowd outside seemed oblivious to the drama unfolding within the limo. But Marcus noticed every detail. The people waiting on the sidewalks, the photographers capturing fleeting glimpses of the luxury car, the subtle whispers of speculation. To anyone else, he was simply a driver. But to Veronica, and soon to everyone else who would witness what was coming, he was something far more extraordinary. The limo turned a corner, bringing the gala venue into view. Marcus eased the car to a smooth stop, his movements precise and deliberate. He kept his sunglasses on for a moment longer, prolonging the suspense. Veronica's eyes narrowed. She felt a strange mixture of fear and curiosity, unable to look away from the man she had sought to humiliate. And then the moment approached, the subtle removal of a barrier that had hidden his true self. The sunglasses, a simple accessory, would become the key to the revelation. As Marcus reached up slowly, the tension was almost tangible, stretching across the limousine. Veronica's breath caught, her mind racing, her pride clashing with an instinctive sense that she was about to witness something extraordinary. Outside, the gala's golden lights shimmered, reflecting off the polished chrome of the limousine. Inside, Marcus's calm gaze behind the partially lifted sunglasses promised a revelation that would turn power, pride, and perception upside down. The limousine came to a smooth stop outside the grand gala hall, its polished black exterior gleaming under the golden evening lights. The valet attendants bowed politely, and the crowd of socialites whispered amongst themselves, glancing curiously at the luxury car. Veronica Sterling sat upright, her chest rising and falling with a mix of irritation and anticipation. She had been trying to assert control all afternoon, yet an unshakable feeling of unease now gripped her. Marcus remained perfectly composed. His hands rested lightly on the steering wheel as he exhaled slowly, taking in the grandeur of the moment. Inside the limo, every detail was in perfect order. The soft hum of the engine, the subtle scent of leather and polished wood, the muted reflections of city lights against the tinted windows. Yet the real focus was not on the car or the surroundings. It was on him, the man who had endured Veronica's tirade without flinching, whose calm demeanor now held the power of revelation. Veronica's impatience flared. "Are you just going to sit there all day?" she demanded sharply, her voice quivering with a mixture of frustration and disbelief. "I expect some kind of explanation for your behavior." Marcus's hand moved deliberately to his sunglasses. He paused, letting the anticipation build, and then slowly lifted them, revealing eyes that were sharp, intelligent, and commanding. But it wasn't just his gaze that shocked everyone. It was the recognition that came with it. The moment his sunglasses were fully removed, the world seemed to pause. Whispers rippled through the crowd outside the limo. Those who had assumed he was an ordinary driver now gasped, some dropping their champagne glasses in astonishment. Marcus Sterling, once a world-renowned tech mogul and billionaire philanthropist, sat before them, disguised in anonymity, choosing humility over grandeur. Veronica's hand flew to her mouth. Her pride, her arrogance, her sense of superiority all crumbled in an instant. The woman who had belittled him moments ago now stared, wide-eyed, at the man she had thought beneath her.
What? How?
She stammered, her voice faltering as the reality sank in. Marcus leaned back slightly, a subtle, controlled smirk playing at the corner of his lips. "Yes, Veronica," he said softly but firmly. "I am Marcus Sterling. The driver you tried to humiliate today is someone who has built businesses, led organizations, and influenced millions." The crowd around the gala had now gathered, sensing the drama unfolding. Smartphones emerged, cameras clicked, and whispers turned into murmurs of awe and admiration. Veronica's friends stood frozen, caught between disbelief and embarrassment. The once confident woman now felt the weight of her actions bearing down on her. Marcus's tone remained calm, almost gentle, but it carried undeniable authority. "I could respond with anger," he said, his voice steady. "But humility teaches far more than vengeance. Today you see that judgment based on appearances can be dangerously misleading." Veronica swallowed hard, her mind racing. She had judged him solely by the uniform, by the color of his skin, by his position in her world. Yet here he was, proving that respect, power, and influence are not always visible at first glance. The silence that followed was electric. Onlookers stared in awe, some nodding in approval, others shaking their heads in disbelief. Marcus's revelation had flipped the entire dynamic, turning humiliation into triumph, arrogance into humility. Finally, Marcus spoke again, his voice quiet but resonant. Sometimes, the most powerful people in the room are those you least expect. And sometimes the greatest lessons come from the quietest teachers. Veronica sat frozen, unable to respond. Her mind replayed every harsh word, every insult she had hurled, every moment of her misplaced superiority. And with each passing second, the realization sank deeper. Humiliation is a tool, but empathy and understanding are true power. Marcus stepped out of the limousine, the crowd parting instinctively as he walked toward the gala entrance. His poise, dignity, and confidence were magnetic, and every eye followed him. Veronica remained seated, her face pale, her ego bruised, and her lesson painfully clear. The once humiliated driver had become the hero of the moment, his quiet strength eclipsing every ounce of arrogance that had filled the air just moments before. The gala hall shimmered with golden chandeliers and the hum of high society, but all eyes were drawn to the man who had just stepped from the limousine, Marcus Sterling. His presence commanded attention without effort. People whispered in awe, not only at his fame, but at the quiet confidence he exuded, a stark contrast to the arrogance that had filled the air just moments before. Veronica Sterling remained seated, still pale and shaken, her designer outfit unable to hide the embarrassment that coursed through her. She had wielded wealth and social status like a weapon, mocking and belittling a man she thought she knew. And now, in front of everyone, she realized how deeply she had misjudged him. Marcus paused at the foot of the steps, glancing back once at Veronica. There was no gloating in his eyes, no desire for revenge, only calm, measured dignity. "I could have responded to your insults," he said softly, addressing her with a tone that carried both authority and grace. "But humility teaches far more than anger. Let today be a lesson in judgment, in respect, and in the power of seeing beyond appearances." Veronica swallowed hard. Words failed her. She had spent a lifetime assuming that status and wealth equaled superiority, but in one moment, Marcus had turned that assumption upside down. Her ego, once untouchable, was humbled, but not in a cruel way. The lesson was profound, quiet, and unforgettable. The crowd around them began to disperse, murmuring praises and astonishment. Some approached Marcus, eager for a word, a handshake, or a photo. Others simply watched from a distance, captivated by the transformation of a simple driver into a figure of immense respect and admiration. The moral was clear. True power lies not in status, but in character, resilience, and intelligence. As Marcus walked gracefully into the gala, Veronica finally stood, her posture stiff, her mind racing. She realized that life had a way of humbling even the most confident, and that the judgments we pass can often blind us to the truth. Marcus had reminded everyone present that day that appearances could deceive, and that respect is earned through action, not assumed through wealth or privilege. Outside, the limousine waited quietly, a symbol of Marcus's unassuming power. The night air was filled with whispers of admiration and disbelief, as the story of the confrontation and revelation spread like wildfire. And to you, watching this story unfold, remember this: never judge someone by their uniform, their title, or their outward appearance. Strength, wisdom, and true influence often come from the most unexpected places. If this story shocked you, inspired you, or made you see the world differently, make sure to hit that like button, comment your thoughts below, and subscribe to the channel for more unbelievable, jaw-dropping stories just like this one. Don't forget to share it with your friends, because stories like Marcus's remind us all of the power of humility, respect, and seeing beyond appearances.